What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Tribe of Runners. I'm your host, Liz Myers, and I am literally getting ready to go to Badwater 135. So, before I do that, I wanted to record an episode. I have been behind, life has been crazy, blah, 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 blah. Same story. I am way in over my head, but everything is going a lot smoother in training. Everything is going a lot smoother in life. And I am super, super happy with everything. I am all packed up, waiting for my partner to get here to then take me to the airport. And we are going, well, I am going to Badwater 135. She is taking me to the airport. But before I leave, I was like, you know what? I need to make an episode. What do I want to talk about? And I've gotten a lot of questions on like training, and I've had a lot of random people reach out to me. Love the reach. Don't ever hesitate to reach out to ask me any questions, whether that be about running, about, my dog, because I post about my dog all the time, anything. I'm about it. I love chatting about running. And one topic that I felt like has been asked a lot is like, how and why I train and coach the way I do. So for many of you that don't know, I work with and I work for the Everyday Ultra. I love this team of coaches, this team of athletes, and of course, we all love good old Joe Corcione. But this team has truly come together, and I've gotten so close with not only my athletes, but other athletes. And we're just a huge community, all thriving and encouraging each other's. The whole team is, we are all certified as USCA ultra running coaches, and we all pretty much train and coach this very same way. Obviously, as coaches, we all have our little things that we do a little bit differently. But one of the big thing that we focus on in our training and in the way we coach is periodization. Now, what does that mean and why do people use that for training? So, quick brief. Periodization breaks training into smaller segments and or smaller training blocks, smaller phases, however you would like to call it. It is just broken up into actual blocks. So this does differentiate quite a bit from your typical type of marathon training block, or like honestly how a lot of people train. And there's nothing wrong with how anyone trains or is coached and or is how they coach. This is just how I personally do it. This is how everyone on the Everyday Ultra team does it. And it's just, in my opinion, one of the better ways to train as an ultra runner. And I personally have found myself gaining so much fitness, so much growth in my running, and I have seen it in my athletes as well. So yeah, periodization, it's what you should do. But more or less like on what this really means is like you focus on certain things at certain times. So there's blocks, and then each block has a purpose. So there's a couple different like ways you could look at this in the actual like stages of building for a race or for whatever you are running for. So a lot of times it comes down to like a build phase. So if you are an entry level runner, you want to build up fitness. So you start from maybe zero or maybe just running occasionally. So you want to build up fitness. You want to build up your endurance. You want to build up your volume. You want to grow as a runner, become consistent, become determined, all the good stuff. Then that's when you kind of can break into like an endurance phase or a specific phase. And then you are training for a race, maybe you're training for a event, anything of the nature, an FKT, something like that. And then you can have your taper into the race, your recovery after the race. So you kind of have like a big build block. It boils down to an endurance block, and then it goes to your taper into your race, and then you have your recovery. But within those kind of blocks, you have even smaller blocks. So in the build block, obviously we want to build fitness. But if you are someone that is an avid runner, then you have the ability to do in speed work. So what does that mean? You have the VO₂ block that you can get into. You have a lactate threshold block that you can get into. So we'll kind of get into them in a little bit. And then once you go through those, and if you have time, you can do, both of them. You could only do one of them depending on how long you have between the race and when you start doing them. And then you have your endurance phase. So when you're in your endurance block or your phase, however you want to call it, you are really getting down to the nitty gritty for said race. So you are building volume, you're getting race specific, you're doing terrain specificity, you're doing back-to-back long runs, you're working on your vert, you're wearing the gear that you need. I'll get in more depth on that. But these are like just building blocks for a race. It does, as I mentioned earlier, vary differently from your typical marathon block. What I see a lot in people training for marathons or people that are, like a 5K, 10K, half marathon type training plan is they will do like a VO2 work, a threshold, and a medium to long run in 1 week. So that's like the big differentiator between the two. As I mentioned earlier, neither one, in my opinion, are wrong. I think this way of training is very, very important, the periodization for ultra runners, because we do some crazy things out there and it's really good to train with specificity. So, marathons, they are long, don't get me wrong. And typically you will see a lot of people in marathon builds that have high volume, but it's all fast work. You're working on, getting a PR in your marathon goal, and it's, a little bit different. So if we go to ultra running and planning for, say, a 50 miler or a 100 miler, your training is a lot different. You're slow, you're easy, nice and smooth, nothing too crazy. Yes, you could do speed work, but at a certain time, compared to when you're closer to the race, when your volume is super high and you're trying not to get injured, and strength training and all that stuff. So it is way different compared to a marathon, but you have to be careful. And that's why I feel like the periodization is very important. It's very, honestly, very, very beneficial, and truly has shown me like this is the way to do it. And for many of you that don't know, I should have said this earlier, USCA certifications are known and done by Jason Koop, who is an amazing ultra runner, is an amazing coach, and I'm super thrilled to be certified and coach all the athletes through this way. So some of the like key principles I think that I want to mention before like we get into the actual training blocks is like the philosophy and the principles on why periodization is so important and like how it works and really like what you're getting into. So the biggest thing is when you look at a training block, you have your start date and you have the time of or the date of the actual race. If I am someone that is going to coach or plan or whatever the case may be for this race, there's two very important things to do right off the back. The first thing is further away from the race, you can be least specific. So if you're running a 100 miler, you obviously don't need speed. Don't get me wrong. Speed is very, very important. But when in a 100 miler, you need to work on that race effort pace, which typically is not going to be your VO2 speed. So with that being said, you can do VO2 and threshold work, least specific stuff on the earlier side of training. So when you first start, obviously we'll get into like what you need to do for that, but then you get into like the middle of it. And when you're in the middle of that, maybe you can still continue to do some speed work, like some threshold work, maybe depending on where your fitness is. If not, you can go into an endurance block. And within that endurance block, you work on becoming a better runner. You gain the durability, you gain the sustainability, and you just push yourself to become a better runner during this. Then when you get closer to the said race, that's when you get very specific. So you start least specific to most specific for race. And most specific things, as I mentioned earlier, it can be terrain specificity, it can be vert specificity, altitude work. It could be, oh my God, so many things. You want to get higher time on feet. Obviously, you want to become durable, know that you can do the race that you're going to do, grow all of the mental toughness. Mental tools are super important. You need to load all of that up. Do back-to-back long runs, do back-to-back-to-back long runs, depending on the mileage that you're doing or the race that you're doing. And you just get really specific for said race. When you're away from the race, as long as your fitness is there and you are a avid runner, that's when you can work on speed work, and it will change you as a runner. I highly encourage it. And we'll get into like what the speed work can look like, but that is so important when training. You want to do least specific to most specific. Obviously, you want to work on the things that aren't really going well. Maybe speed. Everyone wants to work on speed. That's least specific. So you want to work on that stuff too, or that stuff then. Then when you get closer to the race, say it's a mountainous race, you need to get the vert in so you can run said race that has tons of vert and or super mountainous very well. And if it's super technical, try to get in as much technical training as you can closer to the race. It doesn't make sense to do a whole bunch of technical training further away from the race and then not work on it all at all. Is it going to be beneficial? No. Same with downhill training. And like making sure you get in a decent amount of downhill training closer to the race is going to prepare you so much more than if you did it further away. So least specific, further away from the race, most specific, closer to the race, super important and truly makes a difference in training. So that is one of like the key philosophy, principles for periodization. It's why I love it, and it's why I use it to coach. Another thing that is very, very important is like backward planning. So what does that mean? I have no clue. No, I'm just kidding. So backwards planning is like your race is, say, in 16 weeks. I'm not going to just be like, oh, yep, I can definitely do speed work at the beginning, and then I'm going to try to do this, and then we're going to try to do this, and then, oh, we have a little bit of an endurance build, and then, oh, taper into race. No. You start backwards. So this race is at this point, and you have X amount of weeks to get you to this race. Say it's 16 weeks, but you are a new runner. I'm not going to, stir you in intervals right away. That is going to lead to an injury. So what do you do instead of that? So what that means is like backwards planning. So I'm going to know the races here. I'm going to obviously give you a 10 to 14 day taper. I'll get to that in a second. And then I'm going to build endurance because we need to build the endurance for said race. And say you're a new runner, as I mentioned, and you don't do speed work and you've never really done any type of fast type of running, then I'm going to talk to you and I'm going to figure out what's going on, and maybe we can get some speed work in. Maybe we don't have enough time. Maybe you've literally just come to me and you want to start to build your fitness. So I'm going to build fitness for that full 16 weeks. Why, you may ask? Because I think anyone that gets into any type of running shouldn't just go in and get right into speed work. You're going to get injured. But say you're someone that has been working or you've been training for years, and you come to me and we find a race and you have a goal for a set time and I have the ability to throw in speed work, we're going to do some speed works. So what that would look like in training is knowing you have your race, you're going to have a taper, you're going to have an endurance build. I obviously build out the endurance build far enough so I am confident and comfortable that you will destroy this race, but I give you time to do some threshold work, some VO2 work, some strides before you start the speed work. You got to plan backwards. It is something that I think is not used very much, and I think it's underutilized, but it can be very beneficial. And it's just taking a step back and going backwards to, starting from the race and going to the start of actual training. It's the same for someone that is planning a goal. You don't like say, hey, I'm going to use money. It's an easy example and I hate using it, but say I want to have $10,000 in 6 weeks, and you just go, that's my goal. You are not going to get to that goal. And if you do, I'm very impressed and I need to know the secret. But a lot of times you have to look at, I want to get X amount of money. How do I either save up this money to get there, or what do I do each and every week to get myself to have this money saved up? It's very, very similar. You have a goal, you have a race, and you work backwards to get to where you want to be. So that means that in closer to the race, you're going to get specific and do certain things for a race. But when you're further away, you're least specific. It's working backwards to make all of this stuff as one. That is like two important things that I think makes me just love using this coaching philosophy, using this coaching method. I really, really love it. But let's get into some more, why you're listening to this, training blocks, all that good stuff. So in general, you start out, you want to make sure you have fitness, you want to maybe do some speed work, then you work into the endurance, where that's where you get really specific, and then you have a taper, and then you have a race. So let's kind of like break it down and get into single focus training. So when you think about it, if we go block by block, we're going to start with the VO2 block. That is very specific. You are doing fast intervals. When you go to threshold runs, you are doing more of like a sustainable interval. And then when you go to endurance, typically in an endurance block, you'll do what is called a steady state run. That's something I really love throwing into training. I know a lot of people that use it as well. And it's something that you do a steady effort in your training. And it could be, anywhere from like a couple intervals. It could be where you're doing like one giant steady state effort within a run. You could do like a fast finish with a steady state. I think it's very beneficial, and it could be used properly to get a certain goal in certain races. So I love doing that, but that's something that is used in the endurance block. So there's not high demands on intensity in that steady state effort. If you want to go from the rate of perceived effort, which I will briefly explain, the way we use it at Everyday Ultra is rate of perceived effort. Your one rate of perceived effort is super easy, like a walk. I don't typically advise my athletes to go, train at a 1%. It is a 2 to 3 rate of perceived effort. In that 2 to 3 rate of perceived effort, they are nice and easy, conversational. We can talk just like you and I are, well, like I am here on this podcast. No crazy heavy breathing, just your normal type of conversation. Then we go to a 4 to 5 rate of perceived effort. And this is actually where the steady state effort is. So I get asked all the time, well, what does that actually mean? So this effort is a slight increase. Is it over threshold? Absolutely not. So you are not actually exceeding that high intensity or even above the threshold type energy. You're not releasing anything like that. It's just a bump in increase. How I like to explain it to my athletes is typically this is a effort where you can go out and say a sentence to two sentences and then like have to heavy breathe in a sense. I get asked a lot, like, well, what's that look like numbers wise? I hate telling people, but I'm going to be 100% honest. Majority of the time, it's anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute faster than your easy pace. Caveat on that, sometimes that is a little different for people. It just truly depends. And it also can depend on how hot it is outside. Because, like, right now, it is hotter than anything. And someone's rate of perceived effort that changes from a 4 to 5, typically, most likely, it kind of exceeds that. So even though it's, say a minute faster is your typical steady state effort, it's not when it's that hot out because you're, not say blowing yourself up, but you're pushing a little harder. It's hot out. It's horrible. Yes. After steady state, which is the 4 to 5 rate of perceived effort, you have 6 to 7. This is your lactate threshold effort. This is a pace or an effort that you should be able to keep for 60 minutes max. It is a push. It's a steady effort. I love the steady, sustainable effort in this threshold runs. And personally, I love this training block. I love the threshold block. I feel like I grow so much as a runner. And I think it's because I hate sprinting, but also I feel like the longer intervals feel so much more better for me in the sense of like growth in fitness. I feel the burn longer. Yes, it may suck and I may actually hate myself during it, but afterwards I always feel so much better. So I personally really, really like the threshold block. Not to shame anything on the VO2 work, but I hate sprinting. And VO2 work is an 8 to 9 rate of perceived effort. This is typically an effort that you can keep and or hold for 12 minutes. I say 12 minutes, roughly maybe a 10K pace. It is not something that is easy. It is a hard effort. Again, but you have one more notch, which is that 10 rate of perceived effort. With that being said, I do not ever encourage people to do that. It is just an effort that I don't feel like is necessary. So when in training doing VO2 work, it is an 8 to 9 rate of perceived effort. Again, roughly a 12-minute effort that you can hold. It is brutal. It is hard. So kind of going a little back on like why we have these blocks and, I kind of deep dive into each actual block a little bit more. But the reason we have this is so you have a single line of focus. You are focusing on speed work, or you're focusing on threshold work, or you're focusing on endurance, and then you focus closer to the race. And then recovery, you need to focus on recovery and take a taper and all the good stuff. So the reason for this is this will all lead to greater adaptations. You grow so much in one block, then you get into a next block, you grow so much more, and then you get into a next block. You're an amazing runner. I mean, elite right then and there. Just kidding. But you grow so much. It is the bang for the buck. It is amazing. And you typically do it and have less fatigue. As long as your programming is correct, typically I do this in a sense of a 4-week build. I'm not going to lie, sometimes it's a 5 to 6 week build, but usually it's a 3-week build with a 1-week recovery. This is to help people not get injured. So there's no overtraining. You're not super fatigued. If someone's life is super crazy, I might have them do a 2-week build, 1-week recovery. If someone is wanting me to push them and, I know they're handling training really well and I want to push them, I may do a 4-week build with a 1-week recovery. It just truly depends. And this is something that like is very specific. I do not encourage people to be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to keep pushing it even though I'm miserable right now and I'm super tired and life is crazy and I'm super stressed out. Like, not a good call. This is why I love personally having a coach, because I can just tell him what's going on. He will do my training and I don't have to worry about it. And I do this with all of my athletes. I highly encourage getting a coach, not trying to plug a plug here or anything like that, but the Everyday Ultra is amazing coaching, amazing coaches. Obviously, I am one of them. And we have such an amazing team. So if you're looking to become a better ultra runner, do not hesitate. Reach out to me. Go to the Everyday Ultra website. Look to book a coach. We would love to have you on the team and help you crush your next race. But back to the block training. So the reason I think it's so important is, again, it helps you become a better runner, point blank period. I mean, yeah, you get that. But also, this helps progressive overload and recovery. Again, you take the 3-week build, 1-week recovery, 4-week build, 1-week recovery, whatever that is for you and what works best for you. And you're training yourself to like grow, recover, but you're also doing it in blocks, which will help you gain the most in said block, which is super, super important too. You get to focus on one thing and get really, really strong. You progressively build, and you're also trying to build that stress. I know that sounds crazy, but you build the stress of running in the sense to become better, but then you have to recover. It makes sense, right? You push a little bit harder, push the hardest, and then have a recover. Now, when I say that, I'm not saying run faster, run fastest, recover. I'm saying you build volume more, build volume even more. I know that's not a word. And then you recover. But you do this in order just to become a stronger and a better runner. And if you have a coach that is doing that, you grow so much as a runner. And it's just amazing. You become stronger, you get out there and you feel confident, comfortable to crush your race. And it builds all the confidence that you need, whether that's in a speed work, whether that's in your endurance block. But I will say, when you are doing speed work, it's typically not you're building volume. It's typically you're doing intervals. The time under the intervals is what increases, or the amount of interval volume increases. So you're just getting pushed to the max in speed work, but your volume is low. So how you want to do training in that aspect is, if your volume is high, your intensity should be low. If your intensity is high, your volume should be low. You focus on one single thing at a time. As I had mentioned, singular focus, try to become the best runner you can in certain instances. And I always get people that ask and kind of suggest, like, why do I have to do an endurance block when I want to get faster? Why do I need to, do threshold but not do VO2? I want to become faster. I want a faster VO2 max. That's like the biggest thing I think I ever hear, and something is that's all over social media. I think what people always forget, though, is doing threshold work does increase your VO2 max. It increases your fitness, which your fitness is your VO2 max in a sense. When you are building an endurance block, you are still increasing your VO2 max. You're still increasing your overall fitness. Everything correlates to your VO2 max. Maybe not as specific as doing some VO2 workouts, but if you're doing any type of work for running, whether that's, some steady state runs, just some back-to-back long runs, or going out and doing a 200-mile race, you're improving your fitness. You're becoming a better runner. So since we're kind of on all these topics, let's go over the three main training blocks. I've mentioned that we're going to be VO2 work, threshold, and then your endurance build. So when getting to the specifics of VO2 work, this is high intensity, low volume. You are doing fast sprints. Typically, these intervals are anywhere from 1 minute to 5 minutes long, and they can be anywhere from 3 to about 5 weeks long. Typically, you do not see anyone doing more VO2 work than that. It is a very high demanding thing on the body, very fatiguing. So typically, it's a 1-to-1 ratio. So that means if you're doing a 2-minute interval, you're doing a 2-minute recovery. And that interval volume will be roughly anywhere from 12 to about 24 minutes. So high intensity, it is like just going out there and giving it what you got in a sense, but not 100%. What I'd like to say is, no matter what, in that time of interval, so if it's a 2-minute interval, it's a 4-minute interval, it's an effort you can hold for 12 minutes. It is not a full out sprint for 2 minutes or a full out sprint for 4 minutes. It is an effort that you can hold again for the 12 minutes. A good thing I like to do with any athlete that is going into some VO2 training is to do a Cooper test first. A little background on the Cooper test. It is a test that typically you go out and run a warm up, do some strides, and you do 12 minutes at an 8 to 9 rate of perceived effort. You find out really fast what that effort is. You're either going to go out way too hot and your graph is going to look high at the top, low at the bottom, or you're going to go out way too easy and then your graph is going to be super low at start and then very high at the end of it, because you realize you had so much in there. So doing a Cooper test is very, very important. It's not 100% always needed. Typically, if you already kind of know, you don't need to redo it a whole bunch of times. It is nice to do. I highly encourage them. It is a big slap in the face on trying to hold a pace for 12 minutes. That is very, very fast, but it's super beneficial. These are faster sprints. Again, we do VO2 work to raise your aerobic ceiling so you can use oxygen better, because during this, you're anaerobic, you're heavy breathing. So during this, you're literally using your body's energy to sprint, to use energy for the energy, if that makes any sense. You use ATP. That's a good way to say it. You use ATP within your body for the energy. anaerobic, that's what you're doing. When you're aerobic, you're actually using oxygen because it's doable. You can breathe, you're fine. Don't get me wrong, the whole carbs and, using energy and all of that. But you can, you can breathe, you're not sprinting. It's aerobic. You're using oxygen. When it's anaerobic, you're using energy. You're using that ATP. So when you're in these high intervals, like you're trying to push yourself and raise that ceiling to become a better runner, to, become faster and to just become a better runner. It is something I highly, highly encourage people to do. VO2 work, again, I fucking hate it. I'm gonna be 100% honest. I hate VO2 work, but I love doing it at the same time. It's like a weird love-hate, just like hill repeats. But yeah, don't get me started on hill repeats. So the next block, so that's VO2 work. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. The next block is going to be your lactate threshold. So the purpose of this, why do we have lactate threshold blocks? I always call it the threshold block. Why do we have this block? And this is to increase pace and effort that you can sustain without fatiguing, with high hopes. So these intervals are typically longer. They're anywhere from 5 minutes to 20 minutes long. They're hard, but they're not as a high intense as the VO2. This is going to be a 6 to a 7 rate of perceived effort, and these intervals are a 2-to-1 ratio. So what does that mean? If you have a 12-minute interval, you have a 6-minute recovery. The 12 minutes within all of this is an effort that you should be able to hold for 60 minutes. So if it's a 12-minute interval, you should be able to hold that pace in that 12 minutes for 60 minutes. You, again, are not running a 12-minute interval as fast as you possibly can. The lactate threshold is a phase that you should be able to hold for 60 minutes. That is why. Now, what exactly does it mean, like lactate threshold, lactic acid? These words get thrown around all the time. So what happens in your body is, like, when running at a higher effort, past that 6 to 7 rate of perceived effort, is you start to build lactate in your body. So it's a harder effort. Lactic acid is building up in your body, and your body eventually cannot flush it. So when your body cannot flush it, you hit that threshold, the lactate threshold phase. And that's when your body then starts to fatigue because it can't get all that acid out of your body. Now, when I say acid, don't get scared. It's nothing bad. It's just something in your body that will, by end, make you super, super fatigued. But we push ourselves in these efforts to try to become a better runner, to try to sustain that threshold, to push it up a little further, to then again grow as a better runner. So this is, again, an effort that I truly, really, really love. And I encourage people to, like, take the time and effort to really push yourself in this, because the 6 to 7 rate of perceived effort, I think, is an effort that people don't really know yet. And when they get into it, they're like, oh, this kind of felt easy. This kind of felt hard. Find that happy medium. And there are lactate threshold runs and tests that you can do. I typically don't do them too often. It's more, I would rather do a Cooper test first and then kind of go from there. But it is a test, and there are tests out there. You can look into them. Typically, it's a test that you go out and hold for roughly 30 minutes. I have done them before. I've done a lactate threshold. I think I did one way back when. That was a 30-minute one and one that was an hour long, and that was brutal. But really, really beneficial. I truly love this threshold block, again, lactate threshold block, and it's just something to grow sustainable speed. I think it's super beneficial. I think everyone should be doing it within reason, obviously. I just don't think you should go out there and go into a threshold block, only when training is allowed for it. And I forgot to mention, this is a block that can honestly be anywhere from 4 to 8 to probably 12 weeks long, depending on the runner, of course. And it is, again, very, very beneficial. So that's the two speed works. You got your VO2 and your threshold. Then it comes the big end-all be-all endurance block. This is where race specificity kicks in. Sometimes, depending on the runner and how much time they have, you may actually have time to kind of like play with some, maybe not race-specific stuff in the endurance block, but typically when someone gets into endurance block, you're getting on race specificity, you're getting all the gear tested out, you're doing all the things to get yourself ready for your race. So you're doing back-to-back long runs. What that includes is you could do a back-to-back long run, 4 hours, say 4 hours on Saturday, 3 hours on Sunday, or 5 hours on Saturday, 2 hours on Sunday, or 4 hours on Saturday, 4 hours on Sunday. Or you can do a back-to-back long run, and that can vary as well. Typically, you see a lot of people doing these types of back-to-back workouts when you're training for like a 200 plus mile race. And that usually is anywhere from 2 to 3 hour on Friday, say 4 to 5 on Saturday, and then again, anywhere from 2 to 4 hours on Sunday. So you're really building up that durability. You're running on tired legs. That is the whole purpose of back-to-back long runs. Well, not the whole purpose, but it's a very important purpose to back-to-back long runs is getting out there, getting yourself super tired, and then going out and having to run the next day. I even like to throw in some back-to-back night runs or like a late night run, or I do talk about this in a podcast I made on running in the dark. So if you have more questions about that, please go listen to it or shoot me a DM and I'll respond. But I think back-to-back long runs are very, very important. I think they're underutilized. Again, I hate to say that, and they are so beneficial. So do them. I encourage them. Another thing that I think is very underutilized and I think it's super beneficial is mock long runs, or say a mock race run where you sign up for a race, but it's not your A race. So it's a B race or a C race, and you're just going out there and having fun, but you're testing everything that you need and or want for your A race, for the long, big race that you have planned that you've been working so hard for. If you do actually pick a race and you're training for, a different race, say A race, and you're doing your B race, if you can, try to have them be very, very similar. Have them be beneficial. Have it be a race that is technically very the same, maybe vert-wise very the same, or do a mock long run. So act like this run is your race. Go out for said amount of time on feet. Go out and do the hard thing, whatever that may be, and just put yourself in a situation where you're training very specific and you're testing out all the things for your race. Very, very underutilized, very, very important. And both of these should be done in the endurance block. Again, steady state efforts are usually in this endurance block as well. And what a steady state run typically involves, as I mentioned, it's a 4 to 5 rate of perceived effort. It can be anywhere from a 4-minute interval to a 20-minute block. Very beneficial. I typically use these and, see people use them in the sense of like a race specific. So say they're training for a 50K and they want to be, a little faster than last time. You use that steady state as like a race effort. Obviously, you're not going to be in the VO2 aspect of running where you're pushing an 8 to 9 rate of perceived effort, but it should be an effort that's a little higher than like your easy pace. You're pushing yourself. You're putting yourself in that race situation. It is to become a better runner. I kind of enjoy throwing them in some long runs or some back-to-back long runs, but I will only do that if I know the runner can handle it. You do not want to do some crazy stuff with steady state runs in long runs or back-to-back long runs if the athlete is not ready for it. And if you are not ready for it, be honest with yourself. Don't overdo it, because if you do, you will genuinely get injured or, ruin the training block, and no one wants to do that. Also, in the endurance block, you want to work on getting the vertical gain that you need if you have a mountainous race, or work on all the nutrition and hydration for the race. So you need to get race specific. You need to do all the things to get yourself ready for this race, to be ready to go out and crush it. And I think it is something that is very, very important to start a little earlier than you think, especially for nutrition and hydration. Work on it as much as possible. Be smart and, prepare yourself for the inevitable, because you just never know. Always over prep in the sense of like making sure your nutrition is dialed in, having the long list of nutrition that your body can handle, and making sure that you're adequate with the amount of vert that you need, and the terrain specificity. All of these are so important, and if you don't pay attention or start a little early, it may creep up on you, and it may be like 4 weeks out and you're like, shit, my race is coming and I haven't worked on nutrition in a long while. Don't get into that situation. Make sure you're smart and you start early. If you don't, it's okay, but make sure you work on it. Sooner the better. Be smart. Now, the endurance block. This block can be super, super long. It can be super, super short. It just truly depends. And, I've literally seen and used a whole 16 weeks of endurance and then taper into race. Is that the way everyone is? No. But I needed to build endurance. I needed to build fitness in this runner. So I didn't want to throw them in speed work. You have to be smart. You have to know how to use the blocks or the phases in training to become a better runner. And I hope this video gives you tons of information to become smarter, more educated on this process. I personally love to learn. I always say it's better to always be learning than to think you know it all. I am no master by any means. I will continuously learn and educate myself. And one of the things I love to do with all the things that I do learn is to share them. And I think the easiest way for me to do that is through my voice, but not in a demanding way. But check it out. Learn about this. If you have more questions, do not hesitate to reach out and let me know. But before I go, I have to say, once the endurance block is built, it's not over yet. You still have X amount of days till the race starts. What do? You taper. So, what does tapering mean? How long does it work? What all does it mean? Can I just sit there for 10 to 14 days and not do anything? Absolutely not. So, what a taper typically involves is you take 10 to 14 days of recovery. Now, what does that mean? Do I just get to sit around, maybe do some stretching, maybe do some, lifting, which I forgot to mention during the speed work, the lactate threshold block, and endurance block. As a runner, I highly encourage people to lift. And, I think it's getting more and more popular. I have always been lifting, came from a bodybuilder type lifting lifestyle and then got into running. And I feel like now lifting has become like the thing with runners. So do it. It is so important. Have it be specific for running though. Don't just go out and lift some weights and not have any clue what you're doing. But a little caveat on that. When you're in speed work, lift heavier, get stronger, become a lifter. And then when you get into the endurance block, when you're getting closer to the race, you don't want to be doing a whole bunch of heavy lifting. You need to be smart. If you're someone that has lifted for years, you could probably get away with heavy lifting. If it is someone that is new to lifting and they just started, you do not want to be roasting your legs every single weekday, not every single day, but multiple times a day or, one time a week. You just need to be smart when you're training, know when to add volume, when to add the weight, because at the end of the day, you don't want to get injured because of strength training. You want to use strength training as a tool to become a better runner. And not to mention doing a whole bunch of mobility work within. I'm a huge advocate on mobility work. I'm a huge advocate on lifting. I may not do them all sitting down at one block, but I do try to get in as much as I possibly can. But what I was going to say with lifting, in a taper, I highly suggest super low weight, but not enough where it's like you're doing high volume and then you're getting super sore from the high volume. And or taking the lifting out completely, maybe doing more mobility work or like some stretching, yoga, but being very smart. You're not trying to lift super heavy right now. You're trying to taper. You're trying to rest the body. And in that taper, you want to be very easy on runs. Majority of the time, I will throw in very little speed work. And when I say speed work, I mean some like steady state runs. If I do, it is one steady state run, maybe toward the beginning of the 14 to 10 day taper. And then after that, it's a bunch of easy runs, a little recovery run. Typically, the week of the actual race, it's super easy. And I have some athletes that are like, I love this, my body needed it. And I have some athletes that are like, well, listen, I wish I could have ran a little bit more. But the best thing to do is to listen to your body. And I think a lot of people go in to a taper and they either go a little too hard or they go a little too easy. It's finding that happy medium. The week of the race, I like to give like maybe 2 actual runs and then a few optional shakeout runs. Those shakeout runs are just to get the nerves out. Like all of the training has literally been done in the endurance block and the threshold and then the VO2 or just the endurance block, whatever the case may be. All of the training has been done. This taper is not used to continue to build volume. It is typically anywhere from like a 40 to 60% decrease in training that first week of the taper. That's huge. You need to rest the body. And when I say rest the body, you need to get more sleep. Recover that body. Eat food. Don't hesitate to eat a little more food. Obviously, don't overdo it, but continue to fill all the glucose and the fructose and all fill up the body and not everyone eats carbs like that, but do what is best for you and just fuel your body, get tons of sleep, do the mobility, do some easy runs and rest and recover your body for the race. You'll get super antsy. And then majority of the time you get out there for the race, you're on the start line, everything is ramped up and you are ready to go. The gun goes off or they say 1, 2, 3, go. And all the things are ready, all the things are rolling. You go out there and you feel amazing because you rested your body and you recovered. And now it is time for you to go run your race. It's the best feeling ever. I absolutely love it and cannot wait to get out to H9 and go out and feel this way because your girl is tired. And training has been amazing. Again, I had mentioned earlier, I'm like nailing all my training. I literally just had a 3.5 hour treadmill run today. It went so good. And you think, wow, that's insane. You were running on a treadmill and how could that go good? But it did. It was amazing. I think I was right around 16 miles and ran over 5,000 feet of vert, which on a treadmill is just so impressive. And I did a decent amount of power hiking towards the end of it, just because I kind of wanted to work on power hiking a little bit more. And I'm just so excited. So the run went super, super well. And, I'm just dwindling down the days until my actual race. We are currently 5 weeks out from my race. Super excited. But again, this weekend, getting ready to go crew and pace at Badwater. Super excited. But speaking of the race happens. Then what do you do next? Do you just jump back into training? Do you take 5 months off, or do you stop running completely? $1 million question, right? No, I'm just kidding. So typically I like to say I have a recovery block that is anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks long. And the reason being is everyone is a little different, because not only physically do you need to rest, mentally you need to rest. And I learned this so much when I was doing my 200, because my body was ready to run like 3 days later, but my mind was not. I was not in good shape. But man, that's the cost of 200-mile, races. But the best thing to do is just listen to your body. A lot of times when I have athletes doing anywhere from like a 50K to a 100 miler, sometimes it is great to run and or like go for heavy walks or fast walks right after the race, maybe a day or two after. I encourage it. I think active recovery is so, so, so important, and I think it's very beneficial. But some runners just either don't want to, they're super tired, they want to literally rest for a full entire week. That's okay. Listen to your body. I would say ideally I wouldn't like anyone to go over a week and a half to 2 weeks, but sometimes your body just needs that and you need to listen to it. And there's no shame in that. You just genuinely have to listen to your body. You need complete rest. You need to completely come through mentally and physically, and then you can start running again. Now, when you get back into running, you take it easy. You go super slow, easy miles at like a 2 to 3 rate of perceived effort. I encourage people to start out at a 2 rate of perceived effort. Like, make sure there's no niggles and pains that pop up. Be smart, go slow, and then get back into training, and then start training for your next race. Because we all know, everybody like us that's listening to this podcast, we're avid runners and we're addicted to this shit. So we continue to do the inevitable, which is to continue signing up for crazy races that we don't know if we can finish, but are eagerly thrilled to go out and try. So that's kind of it on the blocks. And then, you restart the cycle. Something I did forget to mention there isn't like an actual block for this, but before getting into any type of speed work, whether that be some VO2 work or some threshold work, I highly, highly encourage for runners to do strides. Now, what is a stride? What exactly are they? Sounds like I'm just sprinting. So strides are typically put at the end of runs. They're anywhere from 3 to 5 intervals. 3 to 10 intervals, truthfully, long, and you do anywhere from 15 to 30-second sprints, and then a 60-second recovery. Now, I have a lot of questions that always pop up, like, well, how can I actually hold the pace for 30 seconds when, the timer goes off and I'm not actually at full speed? So typically it's not like a full 0 to 100 type sprint. It is a gradual increase in the sprint and then a gradual decrease. So it's, you just start running fast, run slow, and then you go to your recovery. I've really enjoyed them. I throw them in every once in a while and randomly in training too, because I think it's nice to open up the legs. But that's the point of them. You want to open up the legs. You want to make sure nothing's feeling bad. You want to make sure sprinting feels good. Then you're going to get in some intervals. Very, very, very important to do these before you start any type of VO2 work or threshold work. So don't forget those. Typically, I would throw them in right before we would get into any type of interval work, but there's not an actual stride block within the certification. It's just kind of what you do as a coach or a runner to prepare yourself to get ready for intervals. Super, super beneficial. And I think that's it. Maybe I didn't completely clarify something, but let me know. Leave a comment, reach out, send me a message. I would love to chat more. And if you have questions, I would love to answer them. Never hesitate to reach out. And if you don't know, I have a YouTube. Go check that shit out. And if you don't already, subscribe, like it, comment. Same for the podcast. Subscribe, like, comment, do all the good things. Share it all with your friends. And if you don't know that I have YouTube, I don't know if you know that I have Substack, which is where I blog. So just go follow all the things, please. Leave all the comments, leave all the likes, show me some love, question some things. I'd love to chat. And subscribe, share it with your friends, all of it. Just do it, please. All right, cool. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. And as always, I appreciate each and every one of you that take the time to listen. If you're still listening, let me know. Send me a message and say, listen, Liz, I listened to that whole damn episode and you're amazing. Because you're amazing. Yes, I said it. You are amazing. Thank you again. I will see you in the next one.